Well, hello. My name's Hank Klibanoff, and I teach in the creative writing program at Emory University. I'm a professor of practice, which means I'm not perfect. And no matter how much I practice, I don't think I'll ever be perfect. Um, and I teach several courses, but one of them that brings me in touch with the Rose Library a lot and has over the years, even before I moved to Emory, is the Georgia Civil Rights Cold Cases class, in which we examine unpunished racially motivated murders that took place in Georgia history. The students are examining history for the purpose not of figuring out who done it in these cases, but why, the historical why. What were the circumstances on the ground at the time? What was the political climate in Georgia at the time that might have led to some of these? And certainly, so much of what we know from the modern civil rights era, which is where most of my focus is, sort of after World War II and up until around 1970, we can tie directly back to not just Reconstruction, but of course the response to Reconstruction and the South's resistance to Reconstruction, the redemption period, so much of that. So I've got a letter here that interests me. That's in the Rose Library. It's in the collection of a Superior Court judge of Heard County. Heard County is over near the Alabama state line, below Carrollton. It's south west of Atlanta. And this judge's name is the Honorable Lucius Horace Featherston. His papers cover between, I believe his life covered between 1814 and 1886. So, and just a couple of things about him that I think are interesting. He was a lawyer, he was a judge, he was a landowner, he was a slave owner. And he lived through the Reconstruction period, as you could see, and he was presented with a letter. And by the way, he had a tie to the Confederacy through his son, who fought for the Confederacy. But the reason we're talking about him today is because he received a letter in October of 1866. It came from a member of the United States Army, George W. Walbridge. He was a captain and, according to his signature, assistant major general. And he's writing from LaGrange, Georgia, in Troup County, I believe that is, right near there. And would have been in the same judicial district probably as Judge Featherston's district in Heard County. But I approach things maybe differently from a classically trained historian. I don't know. I am all just sort of visceral and instinctual and sort of what gets my attention. And so I'm going to read the letter and then come back to it and tell you how I approached my response to the letter. So it's again, October 17th, 1866, written from LaGrange, Georgia. Dear Sir, and the Sir, of course, is the Honorable Lucius Horace Featherston. I have the honor to inform you that I have been directed to inquire with and investigate the truth of the report that several Negroes have been brutally murdered in your county. The result of my investigation shows that the result of my investigation shows that 3 have been murdered by a gang of white men, blackened and otherwise disguised, and who are designated as the, quote, Black Cavalry, close quote. Namely, first, James Daniels, and these are the victims. James Daniels, who was working on Mr. Orr's place, was killed on the night of 25th of August last. Second, a Negro woman named Mary Philpott, living on David Philpott's place, was killed by this gang, it is stated, on the night of September 1st, 1866. Third, a freedman named Chauncey Wright, living on Mr. Wright's place near Franklin in your county. The date of this transaction I was unable to obtain, but it occurred, I am informed, several minutes previous to the others. It is reported that no coroner's jury was held at the time these outrages were committed, nor any other steps taken by the civil authorities to arrest the offenders and bring them to justice, and that they are still at large. Will you please inform Major General Tilson if these reports are true, and what action, if any, was had in these cases? Very respectfully, your obedient servant, George R. Walbridge, Captain and Assistant Major General. But he was listed as a volunteer in the military. He might have been from Wisconsin anyway, but he represented the U.S. government in this transaction of trying to find out some more information. Okay. This next thing that I did was looked up this term, Black Cavalry. It said that the result of the investigation shows that these three people, 2 men and a woman, have been murdered by a gang of white men, blackened and otherwise disguised, and who are designated as the Black Cavalry. Well, here's where history poses challenges, because you type in Black Cavalry to look it up, and the first thing that really comes up is, of all things, the Buffalo Soldiers, the black military troops who were formed from the 9th Cavalry and one other cavalry back in 1866, the same year that this letter is written. So you have an official act of the U.S. government to create a couple of regiments of black soldiers, and so they're referenced as Black Cavalry, and later they become known as the Buffalo Soldiers. And this the thread of their history throughout our U.S. history is phenomenal. I mean, just in Atlanta alone, so much of civil rights history was influenced by a man who himself had been in that cavalry years later, in the 9th Cavalry, and was a Buffalo Soldier, and that's Donald L. Hollowell, sorry, and that's Donald L. Hollowell, who was the famous civil rights attorney here in Atlanta and was involved in many of the civil rights cold cases that my students and I examined. But anyway, so Black Cavalry at the time, it's an official terminology for what became the Buffalo Soldiers, becomes something that renegade Klansmen use when they're conducting raids on black people, and when they are bringing terror into the homes of African Americans in the South, or of whites for whom the blacks are working. So then I wanted to know something more about the victims. And fortunately, in this letter, Captain Walbridge names them. The one I focused on, for the same reason I focused early on Walbridge, I go for names that might be a little bit distinctive, was David Philpott, at whose place Mary Philpott was killed. And I just got real curious about him and found out some things that I'd like to share with you. He was born not in the South. He was originally from Maryland, Frederick County, Maryland. But when he moved to Georgia, he stayed in Georgia all the way through the Confederacy, and then died in 1873. He had some money that he's from selling some farmland, and he owned 17 slaves, Mr. Philpott. Okay, he had several children of his own. First wife died. He remarried. Um, and this is information that I was able to get through census research quickly this morning, and through, frankly, wiki sources that have already done some of that research. I will tell you that in my instruction with students, I'm not afraid of wiki sources if really closely scrutinized, but I don't dismiss them just out of hand at this point. But they do require scrutiny and double checking. Um, so here's what's interesting is that keep in mind the black woman who's killed by these men who invade the house in blackface, her name is Mary Philpott. So she's got the name and she is black. Okay. And the landowner, Mr. Philpott, is not. He's white. He is listed as having a daughter named Mary Philpott. Is that just a coincidence? Does he have a Caucasian daughter with his Caucasian wife named Mary Philpott? Or is he claiming a biracial daughter from, that he and his a slave or someone produced? But that sort of gives you a sense of the process that I go through when I come across something exciting like this. Actually, I love it when a student's engaged with trying to decipher a letter, and they'll do it in teams, and they'll come back with their reports and what they think is their best guess as to what it meant. I'm sure that they're professionals I could take it to, but I don't teach professionals, I teach students, and that delights me when they bring this back. Um, so that's sort of the process that I go through when I see a document, both a visceral processing, a response, and then somehow it goes from the viscera to the head, and that's how I engage with the document, and that's where it sends me in furtherance of additional research.